Something Jay-Z even told us in one of our maybe our second or third meeting with him was like, we don't want to change you guys. You guys just like stay as you are. We just want to help you guys become more of yourself. And so
we'll catch up to you guys. You guys don't try to catch up to us. Don't try to be anything that you're not. We gotta catch up to you guys.
Someone said, "You getting big, sis." No, I'm not. I'm actually losing weight. And even if I was getting big, and what about it? Why are you talking about my body? What's your body look like? Send me a picture. Let me judge it.
Today, Infinity Song drops their self-titled album on Roc Nation, a project that'll test the 10-year partnership they had with their label, an album meant to test whether the group can finally cross over from the niche following they've built into a whole new level of success. And in 13 days, their boss might drop his first album in nearly a decade, for the 30th anniversary of the record that started it all. Infinity Song's current situation reminds me of another Carter signee, who dropped their debut album right when their label boss needed the runway. And we already know how that ended. What happens to developing acts when their label suddenly needs to prioritize their boss? Roc Nation and Parkwood Entertainment are companies both founded by one half of the Carter couple. Parkwood was primarily an organization meant to help create and export Beyoncé's projects. Roc Nation was designed to run as a full-fledged management company, working off Jay-Z's fame and cultural power to attract clients. Both have different operations, however, they share a common failure. And this is the part that worries me. Neither company was built with artist development as the core product. And the moment the founder decides to re-enter the spotlight, developing acts find out exactly what they're worth to their machine. If you're new here, I've made a lot of videos on the many mistakes Parkwood has made to Chloe and Halle's careers, so check it out here if you're curious. We all know the official story of how Chloe and Halle popped up on the scene when their Pretty Hurts cover went viral back in 2013 and Beyonce shouted them out. But what you might not know is that the year before, they had a very similar experience. So they had actually gone viral in 2012, a year before the 2013 Pretty Hurts cover, covering another Beyonce song called Best Thing I Never Had. It actually caught the attention of The Ellen Show, and their producers got them on the show, and one thing led to another, and soon enough, they were actually signed to Ellen's label, 1111. Their deal didn't last long though, and right after they departed from their label, the sisters did a string of projects like competing in the 5th season of Disney's NBT singing show. During the competition, it prompted them to move from Georgia to California for better work opportunities.
It felt like a longing, and I was like, okay, I know what's going on in my life that I can relate to that feeling.
From there, the sisters appeared on Disney projects like Let It Shine and also had a guest feature on Austin and Ally. And I want to give some context on what the music scene was back then. In the early 2010s, it was very pop heavy, very EDM. It was the new craze, and rap was thriving on the peripheral though, but R&B was on the decline. Labels weren't interested in supporting Black singers within the genre anymore. Some of the biggest names spoke out about it, Beyonce included. In response to the current musical situation at the time, Be created 4. The project was an homage to the R&B music she grew up on, and she wanted to put R&B back on the map. In a 2011 interview with Complex, she stated, "Figuring out a way to get R&B back on the radio is challenging," she explains. "Everything sounds the same on the radio. With 4, I try to mix R&B from the 70s and the 90s with rock and roll and a lot of horns to create something new and exciting. I wanted musical changes, bridges, vibrato, live instrumentation, and classic songwriting." Sadly, the 4 album didn't live up to expectations, probably because it leaked, and I think that caused most of the damage. Besides, back in those days, it seemed the industry would rather support white artists in R&B like Adele and Sam Smith than the Jasmine Sullivans or Melanie Fionas of the world. There were so few opportunities for Black singers and even fewer for Black child stars. In fact, the reason Chloe Bailey became a producer was because music professionals refused to work with the Bailey sisters. Because there were kids that were too young, so they were like, yeah, I'm not making music for kids. Hurdles like this pushed many young stars to the internet. Keke Palmer mentioned how Hollywood didn't take her seriously until she could build an online audience she can leverage. And that's the same thing Chloe and Halle did. On Disney's NBT in 2012, they decided to invest seriously into their YouTube channel. They upgraded their visuals and audio production. Their father even built them a recording booth in their garage. Back then, cover channels were all the rage, and the Baileys made sure to capitalize on it. Matter of fact, labels were even signing YouTubers like Boyce Avenue, Pentatonic, Shawn Mendes, Asta Mahone, and Tori Kelly. Gradually, they were leaving artist development behind, the traditional artist development model behind, to sign people with large followings. A fate Chloe and Halle would kind of experience in their own way. For timeline clarity, Chloe and Halle's Pretty Hurts cover dropped in December of 2013, I think it was like December 22nd, just 9 days after Beyonce's self-titled album dropped. It had gone so viral that within a week I think, outlets actually featured them on their write-ups, like Hello Beautiful, BuzzFeed, Teen Vogue, all that. And here's how viral it went. January 2014, the video had 966,000 views around then, right? And that's around the time that Parkwood actually reached out to the girls, and I think Beyonce shouted them out on her Facebook. And by the time December rolled around of 2014, the video had around 6 million views.
The kids are all right. We got this.
And I know you're thinking, that's not all that impressive, but this is the internet back then, and it was a much smaller place, so it was a big deal. Fast forward to May 2015, it was official. Chloe and Halle was announced as artists under Parkwood Entertainment. The Baileys had a management and record deal with an agreement of possibly having a $1 million advancement. If I am understanding this correctly, the girls were expected to do 6 projects in the span of 5 years, which is crazy. A crazy schedule for teenagers. Breaking down this agreement to the best of my abilities, because I'm not, privy to law and music business and all that stuff, and looking at the $1 million figure, it'll most likely cover the cost of making these albums over the span of 5 years. Then Beyonce takes a cut of 15% of the girls' profit before taxes, which means if the girls flop or not, one way or the other, Beyonce's gonna get her coins. Beyonce commented on her new signees in a 2016 interview with Elle. The music industry is dominated by men, Beyonce declares, and these labels go out and try to make carbon copies of whoever is successful at the moment, and I'm over that. On the surface, it sounded like Beyonce wanted to build something different, a space for unique female artists in a less male-dominated environment. But here's the thing. When Beyonce signed Chloe and Halle, she didn't sign them to build independent careers. She signed them into her world, and those were two fundamentally different things. The girls released an EP called Sugar Symphony April of 2016. It was the first body of work under Parkwood. It did well enough, despite going under the radar. The EP made it on the Rolling Stones top 20 R&B albums of 2016 at that point, and this is where the cracks began to show. The girls had dropped their EP a week after Lemonade was released, and that would become a recurring pattern. Parkwood would often schedule the girls' activities around Beyonce to capitalize off her clout. My guess is Parkwood wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone because crafting a truly independent rollout for 2 teenage girls with a sound too mature for Disney and too alternative for MTV would have required too much attention that Parkwood didn't want to spend, I guess. That's just my theory. Social media marketing would have been the best tool for the girls to find their audience, especially since Chloe and Halle had their start on YouTube. Unfortunately, their channel was practically abandoned ever since the Baileys became affiliated with Parkwood. They stopped maintaining their channel. It essentially went dark. They were absent most of 2014, then posted sporadically at best afterward, usually around music releases. Chloe and Halle traded their homegrown digital presence for a traditional industry career with Parkwood. Everything became more polished, more coordinated, and more distant, and that distance would cost them. Chloe and Halle's debut album, The Kids Are Alright, was released in March 23, 2018. On this project, they honed in on the sounds they introduced on their EP. It was reminiscent to the alternative black artists of the 90s. Playing with trap, rock, and soul, the album was meant to put the duo on the map. They had the late night performances, they were on award shows, and they were even nominated for Grammys. However, they didn't take off. The KCAA didn't do well on the charts. On iTunes, the LP debuted at number 16 but fell off completely. After a week or so, the same thing happened on the 200 when the album peaked at number 139. This was horrible news. Parkwood had breakthrough expectations for this era, given the best new Grammy nomination they nabbed. And I have a few theories as to what went wrong. The biggest reason being KCAA was ahead of its time.
We don't really care about the trends you like to follow. You know what they say, they're here today and gone tomorrow. Oh.
And with such a unique sound, Chloe and Halle's team ran into an old issue. They didn't know who their audience was. I remember listening to the lead single drop and thinking, oh no, this is too different for me. Although they won me over with cool people, but overall this LP was too eccentric. The marketing was different this time around. The album was strategically tied to Grownish, the Blackish spinoff on ABC. Chloe and Halle were part of the main cast, performed the show's theme song, and even released the album the day before the series premiered. But Grownish had more of a cult following than a mainstream audience. Despite being openers for the On the Run 2 tour and doing all this publicity, I get the feeling Parkwood was too reliant on Grownish for Chloe and Halle's marketing. Meanwhile, Parkwood's real attention went to the Carter couple, who had just released Everything Is Love in June of 2018. As a result, everything else fell by the wayside, including the biggest marketing element, the duo's social media presence. Well, have no fear, because this would be remedied in their next era. The Ungodly Hour was the duo's second album, and it gave the Baileys their first real taste of mainstream relevance. particularly Halle, who was announced in the summer of 2019 as Ariel in the Disney's live-action remake of The Little Mermaid. In some ways, the duo's second LP, The Ungodly Hour, was destined to succeed. High-profile collaborators like Victoria Monet, Disclosure, and Vinyls were added to the project, and the timing worked perfectly. The album was released June of 2020 in the middle of shutdown when the entire music industry paused, creating a vacuum where lesser-known artists could break through, most notably Megan Thee Stallion, Doja Cat, and Money Long, to name a few. Chloe and Halle were right there with them. For this new era, the girls took on a dark, ethereal look. The message was clear. The Baileys were grown. The sound of the album was primarily R&B, all R&B. Overall, the sounds were tweaked to be more mainstream friendly without sacrificing Chloe and Halle's identity. The reception of The Ungodly Hour was amazing. The stats were great. The Ungodly Hour hit number 16 on the Hot 100, and it even charted internationally in the UK, Canada, Belgium, France. The LP was Grammy nominated for Best Progressive R&B Album. They had another song, Do It, get nominated too as well. Which, speaking of Do It, their single went gold and peaked at number 63 on the Hot 100, spending 11 weeks on the chart.
And, we're just really happy with how it came out.
A huge reason why this album cycle did so well was because the duo's team nailed the promotions. Chloe and Halle went back to their roots. Since everything was done virtually, YouTube was their primary discovery tool, a place where their highly acclaimed performances and virtual concerts were uploaded. Their subscriber count increased by around 600,000 subscribers, I think. Other social media platforms experienced rapid growth too, particularly the Twitter. The distance they had created since signing to Parkwood had vanished, especially when the duo launched the Ungodly Hour Tea Time, a series of Instagram lives sharing messy stories from fans or themselves to promote their music, etc., all that good stuff. And it was super successful and very meme-worthy, by the way. If you were wondering, yes, Beyonce did release a project around this time. Black is King dropped around 6 weeks after the Ungodly Hour. Most of Parkwood's resources pivoted toward her, but the reason why it didn't hinder Chloe and Halle was because Black is King was a niche visual project tied to the Lion King soundtrack. It was a different medium, so it didn't collide with any of the music promotions. Plus, the film underperformed commercially, partly because it was competing against Beyonce's other projects that were released around that time. So there was a little bit of oversaturation. Basically, Black is King flopping gave Chloe and Halle breathing room to grow outside of Beyonce's shadow, and for one brief window, it looked like they actually could cross over into the mainstream. However, unfortunately, not all good things last forever. The Baileys went their separate ways in 2021. Halle started filming The Little Mermaid, while Chloe launched her solo career. And this is where every structural problem from their previous eras showed up in full force. I have a dedicated video on this, so please check it out. But the short version of this is Chloe started her solo rollout in September of 2021 with her hit single, Have Mercy. But by 2022, Renaissance consumed the entire second half of the music calendar, and my theory is Chloe's debut album was repeatedly pushed back to clear the runway for Beyonce.
That's it.
That stretched her rollout to nearly 2 years and thus killed all the organic momentum she had built. By March 2023, when In Pieces finally dropped, the entire global operation wing of Parkwood was consumed by the multi-million-dollar Renaissance World Tour. Media platforms, industry curators, radio programmers, everyone was focused on Beyonce's stadium run. Beyonce has adopted a strict media silence policy for her own rollout, and that silence notoriously bled directly into Chloe's project when fans criticized Knowles for not shouting out Chloe on her socials. Some even accused Parkwood for not promoting Chloe at all, but that's technically not true. Parkwood did promote In Pieces, albeit in a month-long media blitz, so they did do something. However, it was a very disorganized and oversaturated rollout. Multiple tracks off the album was promoted simultaneously, which made things confusing, especially since Chloe was also promoting music from a movie musical that she was doing around that same time. Nobody knew who Chloe's audience was. Somewhere along the way, she had drifted into a Beyonce imitator, centering the male gaze, releasing disposable pop music, a direct contradiction of what Beyonce claimed to stand for when she created the label arm of Parkwood. I don't care what anybody says, 10,000 units, first week after 7 years at Parkwood, after Grammy nominations, after being one of the most acclaimed R&B acts of her generation. This wasn't just a Chloe problem, it was also systemic. Parkwood messed up royally.
It felt like so gut-wrenching.
But I guess when you sign up to be part of Beyonce's world, there's no room for anybody else. Okay, so here's the distinction I want to make before moving on to Infinity Song. Roc Nation is not Parkwood. Jay-Z is not Beyonce. But they share one critical flaw. And for the most part, Infinity Song hadn't had time to really fully experience it until now, ? Question mark, maybe. Companies like Parkwood and Roc Nation are like designer labels, in my opinion. They're built around their founder's brand, utilizing their cultural power in their business interests, not around the unglamorous grind of breaking new artists. Parkwood's failure is structural attention. Every resource in that machine exists to serve Beyonce. Always had. Roc Nation's problem is, despite it trying to be a full-fledged management company, it still heavily relies on Jay-Z's reputation.
That's nice.
It hasn't been able to fully operate outside of him. Moreover, since it's primarily a management company, the label arm of the organization seems like an afterthought, so I'm not sure if it's capable of the kind of depth and investment needed to break an act from ground zero. That was never its primary function. I mean, can y'all even name one Parkwood artist, not Beyonce, who is a mainstream commercial household name? Even with Roc Nation, and no, Rihanna and Kanye don't count, they transferred to Roc Nation after they were already famous. The closest I can think of is Willow Smith, but she's a household name because of her parents. The cosigns gets you into the room, but it doesn't establish your career. Now, here's what made the Roc Nation situation fundamentally different from Parkwood's, and why until this year, Infinity Song's situation seemed more hopeful than Chloe and Halle's ever was. Parkwood always had Beyonce at the center. The redirection of priorities and resources was always to her. There was never a version of Chloe and Halle's career at Parkwood where they weren't competing with that machine. But Roc Nation? Jay-Z hasn't released a solo album since 444 in 2017. 9 years. For 9 years, Roc Nation didn't prioritize its founder as an active artist. That bandwidth, and perfect as it could be, was at least partially pointed at developing acts and the other clients, Infinity Song had more label attention available to them than they would have otherwise, but that could change, and the timing couldn't be more worse. Now on to another alternative family group, Infinity Song. I'm newer to this group in comparison to Chloe and Halle, who I've kind of grew up with. With Infinity Song, I've been an avid fan for like 2 or 3 years.
0 out of 10, do not recommend.
So a little backstory on them. The group is made up of Boyd siblings from Detroit, originally a family of 9 children and 2 parents, all raised in church. Their father led the Boys and Girls Choir of Detroit. The current lineup consists of Abraham, who I think is around 33 now, Angel, who's around 29, Israel, who's around 28, and the youngest sister, Thalia, also known as Momo, who is 26, with founding member Victory Boyd having since departed for a solo career. They grew up moving back and forth between Detroit and New York, built a grassroots fan base as exceptional street performers, and became a popular local group known as Boyds for Praise. And all of that hustle paid off when they signed to Roc Nation in the fall of 2016 by Jay-Z himself.
Something Jay-Z even told us in one of our second or third meeting with him was like, we don't want to change you guys. You guys just stay as you are. We just want to help you guys become more of yourself. And so
we'll catch up to you guys. You guys don't try to catch up to us. Don't try to be anything that you're not. We gotta catch up to you guys.
So what's the best piece of advice she's actually given you ladies?
Yes, well, one of the best pieces of advice that Beyonce has given us, she personally has told us to let the world catch up to you. Don't dumb down yourself for the world.
I love that.
Interesting. That sounds very familiar. But anyways, here's the thing about waiting on people to catch up with you. At some point, you need serious progress or you risk becoming stagnant. Before their first album dropped, Roc Nation invested in building the group's online presence from the ground up. They started doing covers, simple phone-shot videos with great lighting, designed to purely showcase the vocals. Some of these covers went viral. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, The Less I Know, The Better by Tame Impala, and they garnered around 200,000 Instagram followers in a matter of weeks. It was a great way to prepare the world for the group's introduction. Infinity Song's debut album, Mad Love, was released in October 2020. It didn't really chart anywhere, but it did rank number 105 on Amazon's bestsellers Neo Soul, CD, and Vinyls chart. Honestly, I think this era is pretty much creating the foundation for the group. They had talent and training, but they needed the branding and the proper industry introduction. Roc Nation was building them up the old-fashioned way. It's also worth noting that around this time, Infinity Song also contributed to Kanye West's Jesus is King during this period. A big feat for any artist, not just a developing group. The next album after Mad Love was Metamorphosis Complete, released in June of 2024. This time, the group introduced themselves as a quartet, the ones we know today, with a new sound, firmly rooted in soft rock. This era spawned 2 viral singles, Haters Anthem on TikTok and Slow Burn. Doja Cat even shouted them out.
I love the way it feels to be a hater. Something so sweet about thinking that I'm better.
And they even had a stint on MTV's Fresh Out. Their content strategy leveled up with high quality vertical videos that made the most of their music aesthetically, and it worked. Metamorphosis Complete got acknowledged from major publications. Their era ramped up promotions. They had a big festival run, playing Bonnaroo, Lollapalooza, and Glastonbury. They had a successful worldwide tour, playing American and European, and even Asian dates. Things went so well they submitted themselves for the 2025 Grammys. Unfortunately, the group didn't get any nominations, and they still hadn't charted. Their profile still stayed pretty niche despite the big promotions. I've always said it takes 5 years for a group to make noise and even longer to crack the mainstream. But at this rate, Infinity Song is going, well, I don't think they could. Okay, let me not jinx them. All I'm gonna say is that there's still a chance, no matter how slim. They've survived this long because Roc Nation, with Jay-Z being inactive, had the bandwidth to keep them a priority. The infrastructure wasn't perfect, but without a superstar founder demanding the machine's full attention, Infinity Song got a version of the label support that moved, however slowly, in their direction. Fast forward to now, the group has released their self-titled album, and they've been very clear in wanting lots of success this era. I've seen the label intentionally invest in raising their profile by roping in content creators, like big content creators, to shout them out. But something I've noticed is that Momo Boy seems to be getting more attention than any of the group's releases. And I'm just hoping that it doesn't mean a disbandment is looming near.
Like when it gets really hard, but there's still like a twinkle of hope.
But as I digress. It's interesting that the same month Infinity Song drops the most important project of the career, the man who runs their label is making a comeback. March of 2026, Jay-Z hints at a new album in GQ. The first serious public signal of a comeback in years. That's when he begins teasing a 30th anniversary celebration for Reasonable Doubt, his debut album, which dropped on June 25th, 1996. Then on May 30th, 2026, at the Roots Picnic, Jay-Z headlines for the first time in years, where he debuts a new freestyle and publicly engages in the Drake beef. He is visibly back in artist mode. Reasonable Doubt's 30th anniversary is June 25th. Infinity Song's album drops, today, June 12th. That's a 13-day window. And if Jay-Z drops or even begins a major rollout in that window, every Roc Nation's resource that should be pushing Infinity Song's release cycle gets redirected. Not because anyone wants to fail them, but because that's just how labels work. They don't get priority anymore. Jay-Z spent 9 years not releasing music, 9 years where Roc Nation wasn't being pulled in his direction, 9 years where Infinity Song had more label bandwidth than they would have otherwise, and the 1 year they dropped their self-titled album. The album meant to test Roc Nation's ability to cross them over into the mainstream. It's the year Jay decides to come back, and that could be a big problem, especially amidst all the company restructuring, the lawsuits, and the dwindling funds in the bad press. I don't want to be presumptuous here. Chloe and Halle, Infinity Song, could have a different story. Even though both Infinity Song, along with Chloe and Halle, had years of operating semi-independently, once signed, Infinity Song had the privilege of establishing a genuine fan base under Roc Nation on their own terms, because their boss hadn't released music for around a decade. Thus, Roc Nation wasn't being pulled towards its founder as an active artist. And frankly, they are more overdue for a mainstream moment than almost anyone in their lane right now. There's a possibility Jay-Z's comeback could benefit Infinity Song. If he's doing promo runs, Roc Nation is visible and Infinity Song rides the wave.
And there's hopefulness that you just are holding on to.
The conditions that allowed Roc Nation to partially invest in their development are changing, maybe permanently. What I'm watching for, does Infinity Song get a real promo after June 12th, or does the priority shift to Jay-Z and stay there? That will tell me everything. Because for all of Parkwood's failures, there's something they did right with Chloe and Halle, and I think it's worth acknowledging. They gave the girls multiple entry points, acting through Grownish, creating a clique for them through young Black Hollywood connections, and then the music. Infinity Song needs the same strategy: film and TV placement, high-profile collaborations, more direct, consistent fan engagement. They've been notoriously reclusive. In an era where parasocial connection is half the battle, that's a real liability. They're making moves in the right direction this era. I see them, but the window to make those moves while the label is still paying attention may close faster than any of them realize, and faster than they deserve. Right now, Roc Nation is dealing with lawsuits, bad press, alleged financial strain, and a founder who's re-entering the spotlight for the first time in nearly a decade. Parkwood in many ways is smaller and more intimate by design, and was always structurally incapable of elevating anyone above Beyonce. Roc Nation is a different kind of machine, but right now it's a machine that has its hands full, so I don't know if we're watching history repeat itself. I'm hoping with this album cycle that the group Infinity Song finally levels up, and I'm seriously hoping they don't end up being another cautionary tale. But tell me what y'all think below. Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, subscribe, hype, all that good stuff. Thank you. Goodbye.